So the Feds just lowered the rate. They cut it by 1/4 of a point. And so now I was thinking, how is this going to affect comic books? And I'm sure some of you out there are like, who cares? Why are you talking about this? That has nothing to do with comics, blah, blah, blah. It does. And you should know this stuff because it will help you make more informed decisions in the future. So I thought we'd speculate on how, speculate, please. I don't speculate. I only spit out facts. So this is all truth. 100% it's going to happen. This is exactly how it's going to play out. Now, I don't know how it's going to play out. But anyways, the Fed lowered their rates by 1/4 of a point. And here's the thing. Is they plan on lowering the rates 2 more times this year. And this year, you're like, it's September. It's almost over. They have 2 more meetings, and they're going to lower it probably 1/4 point each time as well. And you might be thinking, well, how does that affect comic books? How does them lowering rates affect comic books? So here, let me show you something. And this might help you understand. So who here is familiar with this graph? This is a graph of a comic book that is Hulk 271. Somewhere of a key. As you can see how here, going through, in like 2020, it started to skyrocket really high, all the way up to heights never seen before. Look at all these heights. Where was it trading before? It was selling for, $500 before. Then it skyrocketed all the way up to almost to $2,100. And then drop, kept going down. And then it's kind of leveled out back to almost lower than it was before the comic boom and all that kind of stuff. So why did this happen? Why did it look like this? Well, I'll show you right. Look at the Fed rates. So this is a history from way back in the 50s. Goes up, and here's in the 90s. This is how much interest you pay. So if you're borrowing money, a lot of people think of it as like in a mortgage, you're borrowing money. That has it's close to it, but not, it factors that in, but there's more to it for a mortgage. But if you're borrowing money from a bank, from whatever, this is the interest rate. This is how you borrow money. This is what the Fed set the rate at. I mean, if talk to your parents, or maybe you guys are from this era, but in the 80s, you would get a mortgage with like almost 20% interest rate. And that's because the Fed rate was literally 15, 20%. So it went down. Here's like 2008, the crash, boom. But why didn't comics spike way here? Because look at the Fed rate. It's like 0.1. The reason why they didn't spike then is because no one had jobs and everyone's out of money. But anyways, we get here. This is what I'm going to talk about. So let's do this. Let's change this to 2000 and let's do 18. Okay, so here's 2018. As you see, it's going up, and then all of a sudden, boom, this happens. What happened here? This is COVID. So they dropped the rates. What happened? Everyone didn't know what was going on, but they needed people to like go back to work and all this kind of stuff, and start spending money because our whole economy revolves around people spending money. So they dropped the rate. Well, everyone still had their jobs once they were like, oh, this COVID thing, lockdown, who cares about it? And they went back to their work. So now all these people had all this money. Now some people had the stimulus, but most of the time, look at this, for a year, almost 2 years, it was no rates. The rate was so low. And so what happened, and now all these people have money. Money is so cheap to borrow. That's why, do you remember during this time, there's a lot of projects going on? A lot of people, coming out with these weird companies, like I'll give you some examples, Rally, Otis, and Alt. Those were companies where they would buy high collectibles, like say Fantasy 15, and you could own a piece of it, a share of it. You didn't actually own it. You didn't actually get to hold it. It was never in your hands, the Fantasy 15, but you had a share of it. And then you could buy a share or multiple shares, and then eventually when they sold that, you would be paid out based off how many shares you had. Well, these companies were getting tens, if not almost $100 million to go out there and find these collectibles. So they were using all this money and just bidding them sky high. So everything was just going through the roof. All these comic books going through the roof. And a bunch of other people, like Google, was like, oh, we got all this basically free money because look at the rates. The rate is next to nothing to borrow money. So they borrowed a bunch of money and then they started hiring everyone. So a lot of people started getting really good paying jobs. And that's why, I don't know if you remember like the trend where like these girls would like film a day in the life of working at Twitter or Facebook or whatever it was, and they basically went and ate food and talked and didn't do any real work, but they got paid like $200,000 a year. Yeah. So all these people like that had all this money now, and they started buying, different collectibles or anything that they were interested in. So that's what happened. Now look at this. All of a sudden, starting in 2022, the rates start going up, going higher and higher and higher and higher and peak right almost around 2024. Well, look at this. Let's go back to this graph. What happens here? 2022. Oh, the rates go higher and this comic book is going down, 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 and now it's stabilized about the same within the last 6 months. Oh, what has been the same in the last 6 months? Oh, look at this. Been the same in the last 6 months. That's interesting how that works out. Yeah, very interesting. It's because people now have more money. It's easier and cheaper to borrow money. So that's what happens. So what's going to happen now that the Fed is lowering their rates? I hope I made this very clear with this graph. And you can come to your own conclusions, but I'll spell it out for you. What is going to happen? Money's going to be cheap again. So it just depends. It's going down a quarter point, or already did. And then it's going to go 2 more. So it'll go down a half a point. That's what they're estimating, quarter and a quarter again. And I think we're at 4 to 4 and a quarter, 4.5, somewhere in there. So we'll go down some more by the end of the year. So then we'll be in the 3s. Then they said that in 2026, they're only going to lower it one time. Well, we'll see about that. But what's going to happen? Most likely what's going to happen is going to lower more. We're probably going to lower much more than just one more time in 2026. Probably a handful more times. And so you're probably going to have the rates back around the 2, back to where it was, mid 2022. And so comic books were still doing pretty good then. They weren't doing as good as 2021, but they're still doing pretty good. A lot better than they were in 2023 and 2024. So I would imagine, now it's not a direct correlation, but I would imagine what's going to happen, the rates are going to come down. That's going to free up people to borrow money. And what happens when people borrow money is they spend it back in the system. And when they spend it back into the system, whatever that may be, comic books, cars, you name it, furniture, who cares? It's supply and demand. So prices go up. So inflation is probably going to go higher. But people are going to have more money. So you don't really have to worry about inflation too much if you already have certain things in place. Like if you have a house, if you already bought a house, your payment is the same. But if you haven't bought a house and you're thinking about buying a house, what happens when all of a sudden the mortgage rates go down? Right now they're about 6%. So in order to borrow, $1 million, $500,000, $300,000, whatever it is, you have to pay 6%. What happens when all of a sudden that's now 4%? Well, now more people have the ability to buy that same house because houses are supply and demand. They don't really make that many new houses. But if there's like 5 people going for this, say there's one person going for this one house, well, you kind of have to whatever you guys agree upon. But let's all of a sudden say now there's 10 more people that can afford that one house because now rates are cheaper, which means that your mortgage payment is cheaper. Well, they go in a bidding war and the house goes up. So that's what's going to happen. And what about comic books? Let's see. What also is the same as supply and demand? Comic books. That's right. There's a limited supply. So what happens when these people have more money? Well, why would they have more money if the rates go down? Oh, let's see. I don't know. Businesses decide to hire more, take more chances, build more businesses. New companies get funded because now there's more money easily borrowed. I mean, remember that bank that basically went belly up? It was like in Silicon Valley. There's a bank that basically did most of the funding to all these new ventures that people will go into. When they raise money, stuff like that. Well, now when money's easier, readily available, people are going to start raising money more because the banks are going to have it and different companies are going to have it and they're going to borrow to take a chance on this random company. So they're going to take their money, pay employees, pay them more than what the going rate is because now they have all this money. And then those people, if they're into comic books, will start buying comic books, so more people will jump into comic books. Yeah, so I would expect prices to go up. And, inflation's just going to get worse over time. So what you want to do is have hard assets, things that aren't duplicatable. So you really should have a house if you can afford one, so you're not beholden to, rents going up constantly. If you can get one, But yeah, I think comic books are going to go up. That's simple. More people are going to have more money to spend. And I'm sure some people are out there like, well, I don't have any money and I don't see any of this. And it's like, well, eventually it will happen, or maybe not everyone reaps the benefits. But yes, there's going to be more money in certain sectors, and if you're in that sector, you'll probably get paid more. And then if you're into comic books, because you're watching this channel, then you'll probably buy more comic books. And that will inflate the price for all those other comic books that you buy. So you buy an Iron Man 1, well, there's one less Iron Man 1 in the world. So that means if someone wants one, they have to pay more. So that's, comic books are probably going to go up. Now, they're not going to go to 2021, 2020 levels. That's just insane. That's not happening. People have learned their lesson. But will they go up steadily? Yes, they will. They'll probably slowly start trickling up. So I've been saying this for 2 years now that 2 years ago I was saying we're near the bottom, but we've already bottomed out. We bottomed out a while ago. But just because we're bottom out doesn't mean it just bounces and goes sky high again. No, it could just kind of meander around the bottom. But expect that bottom to start, start to rise. So, yeah, we're out of the woods with 2 more rate cuts coming, and probably definitely more cuts coming in 2026 than just one. A lot of people will say like, oh, Powell's on his way out, and Trump's going to put in someone that's more favorable. That's not how rate cuts work. There's, I think, 9 appointees that all vote. So Powell's just one. So even if Trump replaces that one person, that's only one vote. Now that will be the head, and maybe they have some sway and be like, hey, Johnson, vote the way I want to vote, or something bad's going to happen to you. I have no idea. But I think the last couple rate cuts, there was like 3 or 4 people that wanted to cut the rates, but the other 5 or 6 or whatever, however many there is, didn't want to, so it never passed. So even if Trump replaces Powell, that's just one more vote in his favor. You have to convince all the other people to vote that way. I think whatever it is, 8 other people. So I do suspect, though, there will be more rate cuts. I think they're not going to really care much about inflation as much. So, yeah, I expect comic books to start steadily going up again. Think like 2018, 2019 levels, where just things that steadily went up over time. And that's what I suspect. Let me know your thoughts, because obviously I'm an economist, and that's what I do all the time. So obviously my predictions are just fact. No, I'm not an economist. But these are the kind of trends that I see and the kind of things that I think probably most likely will happen. And I believe we're out of the woods, like I've said a million times, and bottom out, and things will start going up. They won't go up astronomical, so don't all of a sudden, sell your home, sell your kids, sell your dogs, and then put all that money into, a Dark Hawk #1, thinking that it's going to shoot to the moon, because it comes down to supply and demand. There's not enough demand to make that to buy up the supply of Dark Hawk #1. Sorry, swags. Anyways, have a good day.